I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a roll call.
Coots,
Here.
Sarah Tiley, absent. Newman,
Here.
Horner,
Here.
McPhail, Dennis, here, and Lois Tiley.
Here.
Everybody got a copy of the agenda? Are there any changes or adjustments to the agenda?
Nope, not since I sent it off to you over the weekend.
Can't hear you.
Not, oh, my bad.
Oh,
There you go. Not since, there's no changes since you got it.
You hear it now. Do I hear a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion.
support.
Support? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. I heard all the voices. Let's see, announcements and public comments. Any public comments at this time, not already on the agenda? Any announcements? Well, let's move on. New business. Saw Grant update by Spicer. Your floor.
Well, hello, thank you. Do I need to talk into this or just let's pick it up?
For recording purposes only.
Hello?
We want to get you on TV.
You're good.
Whoa,
That was good.
Keep my hands off.
move it a little way away from the phone. There you go.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for having us here today. We're here to talk about the wastewater asset management plan, that portion of your SAW grant. Here we go. A little bit about the project. I'd like to talk about the project team. The project team that we had here was Village of St. Charles, of course, Spicer Group. We did the majority of work on the wastewater asset management plan. We had Corby Energy Services on the team who came out and televised and did condition assessments on the sanitary sewer. We have John Kaiser from Municipal Analytics who's helping out with the financials. And then we had Biotech Agronomics come in and do some work on the lagoons. So I guess a little bit about the agenda. I want to talk about first about, what is a SAW grant? What is an asset management plan? And then go through the parts of the asset management plan and really talk about what we found. And at the end of it, the revenue structure, we'll get John Kaiser up here and talk a little bit about, what we're going to talk about and how that affects your revenue structure and your rates. So go ahead, Neil. So first off, what is a SAW grant? It stands for Stormwater, Asset Management, and Wastewater. There was $450 million available through the MDEQ, and they had over $600 million worth of applications go in on the very first day that you could turn in applications. So what they ended up doing was doing a lottery, and so they drew people's names supposedly out of a hat and put everybody in order, and St. Charles ended up on round 4, which was the 4th year that they offered the grants. They doled out around $90 million a year, and they're at about round 6 now. After the first couple rounds got done, they had some money left over, and so they're able to put those on to some of the people that didn't make the cut the first time around. So St. Charles was a round 4. You were awarded that in November, December 2016. And you have 3 years to get the asset management plan done, so we have to have this turned in. We have to have a certificate of completedness into the MDEQ by November 2019. So we're in good shape doing this presentation to you right now in March. So what the Village of St. Charles applied for was a wastewater asset management plan and a stormwater asset management plan, and you were awarded both. Here's just a little breakdown of what you were awarded. About $300,000 for the wastewater asset management plan, about $250,000 for the stormwater asset management plan. It was a 90% grant, which means the village had to put up a 10% match. So you were awarded about $500,000 to do these two projects. So, you know, that's a credit to you for having the forethought to go after this program and get that free money, if you will. So, your project manager from the DEQ is Jonathan Berman. He's just the person we've been, you know, talking with, you know, to make sure that we're in compliance. You can go ahead and change that. So I guess, what is an asset management plan? There's really 5 parts to it. It's an asset inventory and condition assessment. There's a critical assets portion or a risk analysis, a level of service documentation, your capital improvement plan, and then the revenue structure. And no matter, you know, what assets you're looking at, if you're doing an asset management plan, it includes these 5 different areas. So with your asset inventory, your wastewater or your sanitary sewer system really has 3 components. There's your collection system, which is the pipes and manholes and service leads that gets the wastewater from the buildings to the pumping stations, which then pump that wastewater either to another district or to the wastewater stabilization lagoons through force mains. And then the last portion are the lagoons, where the wastewater sits and gets settled out and then is discharged twice annually. In order to collect all the asset inventory and do the condition assessment, we first off, you went to the DPW, we pulled all their as-built drawings, pulled any records that we could find. We looked through Spicer's archives and pulled, you know, any wastewater, sanitary sewer drawings that we could find. We put them all together. We figured out which ones were, you know, the most use, and we created a new master set of plans that we have on file at our office. We also gave the DPW a copy, and it's also been scanned in electronically, so you have an electronic copy now. And we also uploaded all those drawings to your GIS. So we also did mobile mapping of the village. We had our mobile LiDAR unit go out and drove the entire village. And we collected 1 million points per second as this laser went around and laser scanned your whole community. So you now have access to what they call a point cloud, which is like a computer model of the entire village. We can actually get into that point cloud and pull information. It's kind of like if you've ever seen Google Street View. It's kind of like that, but it's a survey grade accuracy, so we can actually get in there and take measurements, you know, to about the centimeter range. So we got into there, we found all the manholes, we located all the manholes, and then Neil and Tito and some other people went out and actually put boots on the ground, opened up all the manholes, verified where the pipes went, and connected all the dots and created this geographic information system that has been delivered and it is really like a smart map. You click on the map and it pulls up a screen. You can pull up the as-built drawing. You can get information on a pipe. There's a link to the video that Corby Energy Services made. Just a wealth of information that you now have at your disposal. And that was all paid for through the grant. You also got a new laptop for Matt, a new desktop computer for the DPW, and 2 iPads that the guys are using in the field that has access to this geographical information system. Corby Energy Services again went through and they cleaned and televised about 75% of the sanitary sewer system. There were some that were newer that we didn't think didn't need to be televised. We ran it all the way up the budget as far as we could and did as many feet of pipe as we could. Corby also did condition ratings of all the pipes and all the manholes for us. There's a process called through NASCO, National Association of Sewer Service Companies. They have a protocol that you go through that you can rate to give a numerical value to the condition of all the pipes and manholes. So it's a standardized condition rating system. Spicer went through and we met with the DPW and did pump station inspections. We actually looked at all parts of the pumping stations, went through the checklist, did a condition assessment on the controls, the electrical, did pump drawdown tests. really, gave them a good look, and then, gave all those a condition assessment also. We had flow meters installed. I think there were 4 or 5 flow meters in strategic locations throughout the village for about 6 months. So we could gather flow information, how the snow melt affects your sanitary sewer, how rain affects your sanitary sewer, groundwater, inflow, infiltration. Wanted to get an idea of, how those external factors are affecting your sanitary sewer system, in real numbers. We also did a lagoon inspection, which we went out and we did a pretty thorough inspection of all the cells and the structures out there. And then we had Biotech come in and do what they call a sludge judge, which you actually go out into a boat into the lagoons, stick a stick down, and they measure how much sludge is in the bottom of it, and then they take samples to see if that sludge can be dried out and land applied in the future when it needs to be cleaned out. And you guys came back clean, so you can land apply. This is just a little screenshot of your GIS. I also have a drawing here, which you can look at later. It's color coded by some of the things in the GIS, but this is what your GIS looks like. And the whoever's using it, they can actually go in, click on a manhole, information pops up. You can get access to a photo, as-built plans, a lot of good stuff. And again, this is just another kind of a screenshot of the GIS. You can color code the manholes, you can color code the pipes, and you can extract different information out of it. Now onto your collection system. Again, we looked at all the pipes, we looked at the manholes, and the other component are the service leads, which we did not look at as a part of this study. So the portion of the sewer that goes from the mainline sewer to the house, we did not camera or televise or do an inspection on any of those. Currently, the village owns from the main to where the road right-of-way ends, and then from where the road right-of-way is up into the house is private, and that's what the homeowner owns. There are some things going on with the water that some government entities might want to change that, but for now, that's what it is. Your pipes. You've got about 68,000 feet of pipe. It's about 13 miles. About 90% of that is 8-inch and 10-inch pipe, which is pretty adequately sized for a community of this size. About 90% of it is vitrified clay pipe, which is it's what they put in back in the 50s and 60s, and it's a very good, robust pipe that lasts. It's very temperamental to installation the way it was installed, but if it's installed correctly, it's a very good pipe. You also have a little bit of reinforced concrete pipe and a little bit of PVC. Installation, about 93% of your system was installed in the 1960s and 1970s. So that puts it, 40 to 60 years old. You had, when we inventoried your manholes, you had 259 manholes. So when you're driving around and you hear that little clunk, underneath your tires, there's 259 of them in the community. So a lot of them were in good shape. Some needed a little help, and we'll talk about that a little bit more coming up. Corby Energy Services actually did manhole scans. They actually had a little unit that looked like almost like a flying saucer, and they had a winch and they dropped that down into the manhole, and as they brought it back up, it would take pictures of the inside of the manhole. Then they took that information and they opened it up flat, so we can now see what the inside of the manholes are on the computer. So all of your manholes, we have this picture right now, so if they start leaking or they start breaking in the future, we now have a record of what they look like, in 2017, roughly, when a lot of this was done. So, pump stations. Again, we did an inventory and condition assessment of your pump stations. This is the Maple Street station. This is your main pumping station or lift station that conveys most of the village's flow across the river to the wastewater lagoons. So this is probably your number one pump station in the village. It was installed in 1971. It's what they call a can style station because it's got a dry pit that's like a tin can that's underground, and then it's got a wet well that all the flow goes into, and in that dry pit that houses all the pumps, all the controls, all the electrical. And that dry pit, that can, is what the DPW guys need to crawl down into if they ever need to service the pumps or, you know, get hour meter readings or anything like that. They're going 20 feet in the ground on a ladder into a tin can. So,
You
Go
didn't
ahead.
take a picture of the tin can?
yep. Go ahead, back, Neil. In the middle,
Yeah,
that middle picture is the entrance to that tin can.
okay, it doesn't look very big.
It's about 4 feet around.
Okay,
And it goes down, and down at the bottom, it widens out to about 10 feet.
So you're telling me I can't get in
it's a place I never went.
It's a place you never went.
You know
You
what?
did? I never
No,
did.
You can't go down there without confined space. Charlie.
Right.
Well, there you go.
It is a regulated confined space, so. The Walnut Street Station, this was also installed in 1971. This is over by the school. This takes all the flow from the school complex and just pumps it up, and it discharges to another sanitary sewer that eventually goes to the Maple Station. You know, this station is also a can-style station. It's got a dry pit can that, you know, the guys get access to the pumps, and then it's got a separate wet well where all the flow goes into. Go ahead, Neil. Your third station is the one on Entrepreneur Drive. This is your new station. It was put in 1989, which is 30 years ago. This is what's called a submersible station. The pumps are actually located in the wet well, down in the bottom, submerged. And if you need to get access to the pumps, you know, because they get clogged or you need to service them, they actually slide up on those stainless steel rails. The guys actually take a winch, hook it up to a chain, and they winch the pump up, and it slides right up on those rails so they get access to it. This is not a confined space because the guys don't need to go down into it to access the pumps. They bring the pumps up to them. The last component for your inventory are your lagoons. You have 3 cells. The first 2 were built, the 2 big ones were built in 1967. And cell number 1, the new one, was built in 1989. You have a permitted discharge of 28 million gallons per year. We think that's a typo, so we are working with the DEQ to help get that worked out. Could take 6 months. You discharge seasonally, once in the spring and again in the fall. And when they're discharging, they take samples and, you know, make sure everything's all right to be discharging. And that discharges to Beaver Creek. Go ahead, Neil. So now that we've done the inventory, we know what you have, we've gone through, we've done the condition assessment, and I'll talk a little bit about what we found with that later. The next thing we did was do a criticality assessment or a risk assessment. We looked at the likelihood of failure of all the assets, and we scored every pipe, every manhole, every component of your pump stations, all the major components of the lagoons. We actually gave everything a numerical score for the likelihood that that asset's gonna fail in the next, 5 to 10 years. We also looked at the consequence of failure. We gave that a numerical score. We looked at economic, environmental, and social aspects of that. If the Maple Street pump station goes down, that affects the community a lot more than if the Entrepreneur station goes down. It just services a lot more people. If a pipe along M52 were to go bad, it would, disrupt M52, it disrupt the community a lot more than, something on a small dead end that only has a couple houses. So between looking at the likelihood of failure and the consequence of failure, we came up with what they call a risk score. And so every asset has likelihood of failure, consequence of failure, and a risk score. And then we were able to go through and rank everything to see where we think it needs attention.
Can I ask which way the numbers go? So we want it to be low or we want it
You
to be
want it
high?
to be low.
You want it to be low, okay.
Yep, a one is excellent, and a 5 or a 6 is very bad.
Okay,
And on the risk, 36 is very bad, 1 is excellent.
okay.
So, what we found, of course, going through the rankings, are that your lagoons are critical, your pump stations are critical, and there's a few trunk sewers that are also your most critical. And that's just naturally the way things shake out when you do an assessment like this. But within each of these, we do have little pieces and parts that we'll talk about that we think might need to be addressed. So this is just a copy of one of the sheets, and it just shows that, this particular one is sorted by likelihood of failure.
So I think we-
I can hear
Yep. And all these charts are gonna be in this book that you get at the end of our study.
Oh, bigger?
It'll also be electronically.
Bigger?
Oh, it's gonna be.
There-
We
No,
can't
I
read
mean,
those numbers, yeah.
Oh, the print is gonna be a lot bigger.
Okay.
You can't read it on there, and that's fine.
close, but.
That's fine. This is just meant to show that we can prioritize and color code all of the assets. And in this particular one, we were looking at likelihood of failure. And there's about a dozen sanitary sewer pipes on here that we think we need to address. Out of the hundreds of pipes you have, there's a dozen of them that we think we need to do something with. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Neil for a couple minutes, and he's gonna talk about, what we found with the pipes and the manholes.
Hi, yep, so I'm Neil Nowak, and here's just a few pictures of what we found as the sanitary sewer system was being televised and inspected for condition. The picture on the left there is, I believe, a 12-inch heading. That's a concrete or reinforced concrete pipe that's heading right just before the Maple Street pump station, and these are both examples of good condition pipe. And the one on the right that looks very bright and orange, that's a vitrified clay pipe. So that's something that would have been installed probably in the 60s or 70s, and that makes up the majority of your system. And again, a lot of the system, or much of the system looks that way, with just spots here and there that are in pretty rough shape, as you can see by this slide here. So this is Sunview Drive, and what you have in the, I'll just kind of go starting the top left and kind of go clockwise there. With NASCO and the PACP, or Pipeline Assessment Certification Program, each defect has a code and is associated with a score. So on the top left there, that's a broken pipe, and these pictures might be a little bit difficult to see, and these are screenshots from the video of when the pipe was actually being televised. So you have a broken pipe throughout this stretch of Sunview Drive from the dead end all the way to 52. Deposits attached, which is a very good indicator of infiltration or groundwater getting into the system, which ends up being treated and is an extra added cost. Another example of broken pipe, and these are at different segments along that length of pipe. An offset joint there on the bottom left, and I'm not going clockwise anymore. And the middle bottom is infiltration gusher, and that's not a drip from the top, that's actually shooting up like you guys are in Yellowstone into your pipe. So that's, you set a clock and over the course of a day, and that's a lot of water coming into the system. And as you can see, the incrustation around that, which is minerals, build up over time. On the bottom right there is a fracture, spiral fracture that actually usually occurs at a joint, and that's when you have two pipes that are connected together, and one of them has increased pressure or a drop, maybe some soil washed out underneath of it, and it's put a lot of pressure on that joint, and you'll oftentimes see a fracture or a broken pipe along that joint.
No, these are clay pipes?
Yes, from Sunview is a clay pipe, vitrified clay pipe.
Another thing you can see on the bottom left, the pipe isn't straight. If you look carefully, the pipe almost looks like it's corkscrewing.
And also one thing to note, and you can't really see this from the pictures too well, but if you watch the actual video, the pipe does a lot of this, so it has a lot of sags and peaks and valleys, so, you know, obviously with sanitary sewer and being a gravity sewer, you'd like a straight grade to consistently run downhill. Well, that's not the case, so you have a lot of standing water, backups, things of that nature. And then here's a pipe example of two pipe examples of Saginaw Street and then East Bell. East Bell, you have on the far right there another example of a gusher, and that one might indicate show it a little bit better. You have water coming into the system that's being treated. Also East Bell, you have an offset joint. That one's pretty significant, and as you can see, that pipe is shifted up. So with that, you're also going to have infiltration. And then there's a fracture multiple, so that's a localized several fractures in the same spot, and this is along Saginaw Street. So I think what we're recommending for that, it would be like a spot repair because it's fairly close. It's just off the right of way. It's fairly close to a manhole.
Can I ask if the East Bell is before or after the railroad tracks?
I don't think we know right now, but we could get that from the video.
I'm just curious if flooding would have anything to do with this, or with it breaking apart, or,
It could. And
you know, because south of the tracks floods a lot.
Yep, a lot of time
This,
it's probably.
well, east of the tracks floods a lot.
What we found with your system is there's so much groundwater in the area, you almost always have groundwater coming into
Okay.
your sanitary sewer system. Whether it's flooding or it's just regular
It's just there.
groundwater, there's always water coming into your
Okay.
system.
And I do believe this would be before or west of.
This
west
side, town side
yes.
of the, okay.
So we also looked at the manholes. Corby Energy Services went and uncovered a lot of the manholes. As you can see from the picture on second from the right there, quite a few of them were actually buried, which is not ideal for if they need to be accessed. It creates problems locating them and accessing them. And then you have holes in people's yards. So those would likely need to be raised, and we can talk about that later. Picture on the right shows a very rusted frame, that metal frame that sits on top of a chimney and a cone of a manhole that are concrete. Also, there's roots coming into the system there. With the number of defects, so 1 through 5, there's 1 through 5 scoring. 21 of those were level 5 throughout the system, and 82 level 4 defects, which would be, so that's kind of a pretty good indication of out of your 260 manholes, and the rest would fall 3, 2, 1, so not as significant. And the picture on the left there is just an example of a corroded manhole cover, the part that you see.
And some are buried.
Yes, and buried and offset, so the picture on, this picture right here, you can see, if I get out of the way, how it's like a crescent moon shape.
Yeah.
Well, this is the frame, and what happens is over time, if it's not secured to that chimney, and oftentimes you'll see this in a road too, that it could be shifted. It should be shifted this way to line up perfectly over top, and you can see soil that over time, groundwater brings that soil in to the manhole.
So
which
there's quite a
creates
few
issues.
people that could have them in their front yard and not even know it.
If they're buried.
Do they
yes.
know it now because they've been uncovered?
They should.
Okay.
Yep, some do know. Yeah, they've called.
Okay,
What are you gonna bury this hole in my yard?
okay.
Okay, next we're gonna talk about pumping stations. The Walnut Station, again, this station was, built in about 1971. It's had very little put into it since then. The pumps have been rebuilt a couple times, but there's really been no significant, investment or really anything put into this station. This station has been very reliable. You haven't had a lot of trouble with it. The DPW guys have done a tremendous job keeping this thing up and running. However, it is 50 years old, it is at the end of its useful life, and sometime in the near future, you really need to do something with this station so it remains and continues to be reliable. This station is a really good candidate. I think I missed the Maple station, we'll go back to it. But this station would be a good candidate for a rehabilitation, which would be new pumps, new electrical, new controls. You can see from the photos that there's a lot of rust on the piping. It looks like the steel can structure itself is okay, but there's a picture on the bottom right there that shows, looks like some work has been done, maybe some welds around that pipe penetration, looks like through the roof. So, you know, that's something that we really want to, you know, take a good look at, is the structural integrity of that steel can, and, you know, do something with this station in the near future. This station could potentially be converted to a submersible station, which the guys would never even need to go down into that
Like the
steel
one up
can.
here.
Yep. So there's a potential to do that as a part of a rehabilitation. Wanna go back, there we go. Maple Street. This is Maple Street. This station was also built in 1971. You know, very similarly, it's been a very reliable station. I'm gonna knock on wood again. You know, pumps have been rebuilt a couple times. You can see from the pictures, you know, it's access getting down to the dry pit is difficult. It's a confined space. The electrical is 1969, 1970, 71 technology. You know, it still works, it's robust. You can see the piping is starting to rust. The second from the right on the bottom is the pump support, the pump base. It's starting to corrode. It's still got some life left into it, but at some point in time, we're gonna wanna do something with it. This station is also a very good candidate for a rehabilitation. That would be new pumps, new piping, new electrical, new controls. We would recommend, you know, that happen at this station so it continues to be reliable and serve the community. Entrepreneur Drive, this is probably the least used of your station, of your pumping stations. It was designed to service a larger area and, you know, the large manufacturing facility out there. So it's kind of oversized for what it's being used now. It doesn't run very often. This was built in 1989, so it's 30 years old. You can see from the pictures, you know, the piping's pretty rusty. The pumps still run well. You know, the electrical and controls are 30 years old. You know, if I had to rate the station, this is the last one you're gonna do something with. But you do need to do something with the valve vault that's out there. It's completely filled with water, and having equipment and valves and stuff underwater is not a good idea. We think there's a drain plug or the check valve that's malfunctioned. So we either need to get that cleaned out or install a sump pump or something in there just to keep the water out of that valve vault. So that's one of the things we're recommending for this station. With the lagoons, I gotta hand it to your DPW guys. They have really done a tremendous job keeping your lagoons up and running over the years. On the left is a picture of the inlet structure. All the wastewater flow from the village goes into that inlet structure. That middle picture is with the top pulled back. You know, the guys are using basically pallets as a cover for that inlet structure, which isn't really the best practices used today, but it works. That center picture is an inlet structure, and what the guys can do is they use boards to channel the flow from one lagoon cell or the other lagoon cell, and they physically have to go down there, put the boards in, or take the boards out. So, you know, the DPW guys are out there getting dirty and wet to do stuff like that. Picture on the right is, it's either cell 2 or 3, I'm not sure, but you can see the side slopes are eroding. It's pretty significant. So we need to be doing something about that erosion. The left and the center picture, actually all three of these pictures are of the discharge structures that are on each lagoon. And these discharge structures are supposed to have valves on it, so you can open the valves and move water from one cell to another cell. All the valves are broken, they're rusted, they're gone. The guys have been using inflatable plugs as their control for this, so when they need to get water from one cell to another, they have to physically go down, deflate a plug, pull the plug out, try to step aside so they don't get wet, and then get out of there. So your DPW guys are doing a tremendous job keeping this thing running. Really need to get some work done on these. It's gonna be very difficult to put new valves on this structure, so one of the things we're recommending is to rebuild these discharge structures and make it so, you know, the valves are up to date, a little easier to work on, and if the valves need to be replaced in the future, we can replace them. This is your outlet structure. This is where seasonally it's discharged from the lagoons. They pull one of the plugs out, open it up, and it gets discharged through this structure out to the Beaver Creek drain. The outlet structure itself, that concrete structure, could use some work. You know, that needs to be replaced at some point in time. The channel itself looks like it's in reasonable shape. The picture second from the right is another one of the lagoons. You can see the side slopes are sloughing off. In some cases, the access road is unpassable. So we really need to do some work on two of the lagoon cells, you know, to get all that dirt out from the bottom of the lagoon and back up onto the bank. It'll give you more volume and more stability out of the lagoon. So now that I've given you all that good news, what we need to look at next are really the nuts and bolts of an asset management plan. And really what we're looking to you for your input on, you know, what sort of level of service you want to provide your customers in the future. And then we're going to look at what capital improvements are needed to provide that level of service. And then we want to look at what rates are needed to support that capital improvement plan to get you to that level of service. Basically, we're looking at, do you want your system to be a Cadillac, a used Chevy, or an old pair of flip-flops? You know, we've got those three different levels of service. And, you know, and right now, you're cruising around, you know, in a Chevy that's got 200,000 miles on it, and the tires are a little old, and it's getting you from point A to point B, but one of these days it's not. So that's kind of where you're sitting right now.
John just described my truck.
Yep. So level of service, as part of this report, we need to put, you know, a level of service documentation in. So we're gonna come up with a statement that reflects what services you wanna provide your customers. And then really talk about, you know, what are the long-term goals. And some of those goals, you know, might be, you know, as a Cadillac, we wanna replace the entire system in 20 years. You know, as a Chevy, we want to, let's fix the items that we've identified, and then maybe do some lining projects to help keep some of that inflow and infiltration out of the system, and maybe plan a little bit, you know, for the future and do some things that are gonna provide us a value in the future. And then a low level of service might be, let's just leave it alone and let it go and let it run till it fails. So, I mean, so there are different levels of service that you could decide to, you know, provide your customers. And again, you know, low level of service, that has the lowest cost and the least amount of service. We're gonna do the bare minimum to meet the requirements of the MDEQ and the EPA. We're gonna, you know, make sure that there aren't any backups in people's basements, and if there are, we'll respond promptly. but we're not really in a position to set money aside to do some, big projects in the future. A medium level of service, it's gonna cost a little bit more, but maybe you do some things that help out in the future. Instead of replacing a pipe from point A to point B, which would be a high level of service, maybe we do a spot repair and then line the pipe. And that'll get you through for, another 30 to 50 years. Then as a high level of service, again, that costs the most. And it's gonna reflect in your rates, but, if it is your will and you're choosing that you want to provide your customers this high level of service, that is something that can be attained. So again, as a part of this, we're gonna be looking at your capital improvement plan. And, you can go copy this. Add them to the council. In this capital improvement plan, we've listed out, various items for your collection system, your pumping stations, and your lagoons. And for each one of the proposed projects, we've listed what we think are a low level of service, a medium level of service, and a high level of service project. So, I'm gonna need my glasses because the print's a little small on this one too. So if we look at the top, Sunview Drive, a low level of service, maybe we do nothing. A medium level of service, maybe we do point repairs, we fix the sags, and then we line it. And as a high level of service, we replace it. Now, in this particular street, you might be in a position to provide the higher level of service because there's really not a lot of cost difference between doing all the spot repairs or replacing the whole thing. So that's the kind of project you might look at a higher level of service. The next project down, North Saginaw Street, there's a hole in it, there's a fracture. Low level of service, you do nothing. A medium level of service, we go in and do what they call a pipe patch, where they actually go in, it's kinda like a heart catheter when they put a stent in your arteries. It's kinda like that, they go in, inflate a balloon, and, stick a patch onto the pipe. And we did that out here on Pine Street, Corby did that. And then a high level of service might be, let's dig it up and let's actually cut a section out and replace it. And Bell Avenue is similar. Manhole repairs, one thing we are recommending with that is to set aside, we just kind of threw out the number of $10,000 a year, to have the DPW guys go out and fix 20 of them a year or something like that. Just have a budget line item. It's probably more a operation and maintenance item than a capital item, but let's get a budget item in there so they can go out and they can dig up these manhole castings. If they need to be raised, they can raise them. If they need to be shifted and reattached, they can reattach them. If the manholes are leaking, they can put some mortar and kind of seal them up a little bit. So, let's get a program put together where, we're actually setting some resources aside and attacking this. Not all at once, but just chipping away at it every year. And then the last thing we have for the collection system is a cured in place liner system. With your vitrified clay pipe, that pipe has a tendency over time to have leaky joints, and you saw the calcium deposits around the joints in some of the pictures. You saw some of the pictures of the pipe cracked. The pipe does get brittle, but again, if it's properly bedded, it's very good pipe. In vitrified clay pipe, instead of replacing it, you can run a liner, from manhole to manhole, and basically have a brand new pipe inside of that. So one thing we would like to see is, some sort of CIPP, cured in place pipe program, be implemented here. Again, a low level of service, we don't have to do anything right now. A medium level of service, we figured out if we wanted to do the entire system over 20 years, it'd be $175,000 a year. Now, that's probably not attainable, but I just wanted to see what it would take to do the entire system over 20 years. If you wanted to do it over 10 years, it'd be $350,000 a year. So, you know, if you could set aside, you know, 50 to 75,000 a year and start chipping away at some of these, and maybe start off with the more critical ones and work your way out in the system, I think that would go a long way. After 10 years, I think you'd see a tremendous improvement in the system. For your pumping stations, for Station 3, which is on Entrepreneur Drive, you know, again, we're talking about installing a sump pump in that valve manhole. You know, in the future, a rehab of the station to replace the pumps, electrical and controls, you know, that would be something that would be warranted. I'd say every 3 stations, that's the last one we're gonna look at, so that's farther out on your capital improvement plan. Pump Station 1, East Maple, that one, the medium and the low level of service are the same project. It's just a rehabilitation, replace the pumps, replace the piping, replace the electrical and controls. And then, you know, as a high level of service, you know, maybe we replace the whole station. You know, it probably doesn't need to be needed right now, so with that one, it might be a good candidate for like a medium level of service where you're, you know, proactively replacing the pumps. Walnut Station, you know, again, we could rehabilitate that station, or, you know, add a permanent generator and rehabilitate the station to a submersible, and get rid of your confined space entry, or possibly replace the whole thing. So, you know, those are 3 different options that we've looked at. For your lagoons, when we went out in 2017 and did our inspection, of the 6 floating aerators that were out at the site, only 2 of them were working, and since then, both of those have stopped working. So right now you have no aerators working at your lagoons, which hasn't really been bad. You've been meeting your discharge limits, so everything you've been discharging has been okay. There haven't been any odor complaints. The duckweed's under control, so unless, you know, you're missing your discharge limits, you're getting odor complaints, or some duckweed or weeds and lilies are starting to grow, you know, maybe you can get away without the system. And then if we do end up needing something, you know, as a medium level of service, we could put the same floating aerators back, but they're kind of a obsolete technology. A higher level of service, it's gonna be a little more expensive, but it's gonna give you more bang in the long run. Might be a bubbler system, or, you know, a fine bubbler or something like that, where all the equipment's up on the bank, and all you have in the lagoon are, you know, hoses, air hoses, you know, bubbling air up through the lagoon, versus having a motorized floating, you know, apparatus out in the middle of the lagoon that you have to get into a boat to go surface. So, your effluent structures, any way you slice it, those need to be replaced, low, medium, and high. We're recommending, you know, some work be done on the effluent structures. Your primary influent structure, you at minimum, you would like to see some metal grates put over that structure, and in the pictures there were some cracks. I think we, you know, have some concrete cracks that could be epoxied or butted up anyways. Another option, you know, we could replace the cover, maybe put a new concrete cover on it with a aluminum hatch. High level of service would be to completely replace that structure. It's almost 50 years old, you know, replacing it might be an option, very expensive option though. Cells 2 and 3 at the lagoons, you know, again, low level of service, you know, do nothing, continue to let it deteriorate, that is an option. Medium level of service, we could excavate the slopes, get all that soil and debris out from the lagoon, bring it back up on the bank, build those banks back up, stabilize them, you know, at least get the banks back up to par.
can you pull that out of there and just leave it sit? Is that environmentally safe to do that?
That's
Or do
actually,
you then cover it with clay and,
what we would do is actually, put stone riprap over top of it. We pull back the material that we can.
okay,
If the material is okay to leave there as it's, you know, it's not pure sludge.
right,
It actually has some physical
Like dirt
properties, I
value
mean,
to
that it's
it.
good soil. You know,
Okay.
we could pull it up and use it, and then cover it with like stone riprap.
like at the bridge,
Yep.
okay,
You could do something like that. If it's not good material, you know, we're gonna be cleaning out your lagoons and
hauling it away.
hauling it away, which you have to do sometimes anyways. It's just now we have to bring more material in to stabilize instead of using what's already there.
Okay.
Stone
There's
riprap.
testing you can do ahead of time to determine
Yeah,
that?
yep, as a part of, you know, if we were to move forward with a project, that's the very first thing we would do is get in there and look at it and actually, you know, do a mechanical analysis of what's out there and see what we can do.
Yeah, because well, never mind. When we built those buildings out there, we had to take all of that stuff out of there,
Yeah,
because we had put the stuff in,
yep.
trees, et
And-
cetera.
And the real problem comes if you have to do something like that, and you have to take one of the cells down, do you have enough capacity in the
Right.
other two cells, or do we need to build a third cell in order to do the work?
Yeah, I see you have on here to purchase property and build a cell. Don't we have property out there already to build a cell in?
Your property out there is very limited. To the east and to the north, and to the south is all wetlands.
Well, I know, but can't you
So-
just trade that off for some other wetlands?
You-
That's how they became wetlands in the first place.
You can, and the way the DEQ does that is sometimes up to a 4-to-1 exchange. So if you're
Because
taking-
those weren't wetlands
Right,
until we traded them to
Right.
be wetlands.
yep.
Okay,
Yeah, they actually require a 4-to-1
It's
exchange.
4-to-1 or sometimes 10-to-1.
is it,
So,
so it wasn't that way before? I just flipped lots. I mean,
the last 10 years, they have been very stringent
Okay.
on wetlands. And I've seen a 10-to-1 swap where if you wanna take 1 acre of wetland, you have to donate 10 acres.
okay,
So is it possible? Yes. Is it cheap? No.
well, where else would we purchase it from out there? I mean, isn't that all surrounded by,
Wetlands.
A lot of it's the
Wetlands?
Shiawassee Flats.
yeah,
I mean, Shiawassee Flats butt right up against it, I believe. So, I don't know if that's the federal area.
The state gain,
That's-
would we wanna
That's
bring
the
it,
state,
the state gain
Yeah.
area.
would we ever wanna bring it forward?
so,
I don't know.
Okay.
yeah.
You
So, I
can't
mean,
go, you can't move too far away, you've gotta stay,
it's gotta be pretty
it's
close.
gotta be together.
It's gotta be close to that area or a second site in a different part of the community.
Okay,
So, you know, one option, if there's not room out there, might be to put another lagoon system down by the school somewhere. I mean, that might
Okay.
be an option to look at. You know, instead of doing a 4-to-1 or 10-to-1 swap of wetlands up in the north part, maybe there's a site, some other spot that would
Buy
work
it
better.
outright.
Yep,
well, you go out there and tell those people we're gonna put a lagoon right in the middle.
No, I'm just, that's an alternative.
right, right. So,
I
so I
don't
mean,
think you
there's,
could have much luck.
there's lots of options out there, and if we did need to build a new cell, you're looking at a $3 to $6 million
I see that.
project.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's huge. So, if at all possible, we're trying not to do that.
Right, so we need to upkeep the ones we have
Absolutely.
and make them more
Effective.
productive.
To make them more productive, more effective, protect them for the future, because it's only gonna get more expensive.
So really, John, a project would need to be after a seasonal discharge.
A project would need to be after a seasonal discharge, and it would need to be carefully timed.
Right.
And you usually discharge right about now, March,
We
April?
start in a couple weeks.
Yeah. March, April, and then again October, November.
So you'd have to get ready for it, like almost the year
You
before.
would have to be real efficient about what you
Oh,
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be ready to go
Yep.
like the week after.
Mhm.
So that's what we have in our capital improvement plan. You know, we've got some things we wanna look at, some things are more critical than others. You know, we have some we have some ideas, and really what we're looking for tonight, out of the council is an idea for, how do we wanna move forward, regarding, level of service and the revenue structure, because all these projects, you gotta be paid for, and they can, part of this study is to do a rate study and look at how these different options affect your rates. And as a part of the SAW grant, we need to look at your 5-year rate structure and then also your 20-year rate structure. So we need to look at your immediate needs in that 5-year and then really project out farther, to see what really needs to happen to, keep the community going, for the foreseeable future. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Kaiser for Municipal Analytics, so he can talk a little bit about the rate study and what he's found. With that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Plug in up there?
Yep. You got a HDMI? Just set it on top of mine if you want.
Okay, so I'm John Kaiser with Municipal Analytics. Sorry I was a little bit late, but I was enjoying the rail trail. It's too good of a day to pass up, so sorry. So here you can just see I've got the CIP in here. What I'll talk about is where we are with some of the initial estimates, and this is by no means final. We're looking at sewer, we're also looking at water. And the water asset management plan hasn't been completed yet. So I've just got some numbers in there for now to work with. We can talk about things in general.
You don't have a handout for this, right?
I do not, because it's gonna change. But these won't all be so small. I can make them larger as well. So what we've got in here, let's focus on the sewer. We have in the model your sewer budget, your water budget, every line item we've taken a look at and forecasted out and applied an assumption to. Wages are separate than utilities, are separate than telephones and that sort of thing. So we're trying to look at what the most realistic projection is going forward. So the day-to-day operations and maintenance costs don't change much. It's really the capital that's going to be impacted. And it's going to probably involve some form of debt. You've just paid off a water debt, and it looks like at some point we're gonna have to issue some sewer debt to fund some of this, because the costs could be potentially high depending on the level of service you chose. For purposes of what we're talking about right now, I'm gonna make this larger so it's visible. So we've assigned all of those projects in the CIP that you were just looking at and that John was talking about. They're all listed here. A couple of them are annual, so they're every year. It's not just a capital, but a more of a maintenance item. And then we've assigned the level of service to them that initially makes sense right now. And then whether it's gonna be funded by cash out of your reserves or your rates, or if you're gonna bond for it. So we've made some assumptions there. And you can see a number of these are listed for bonding. Just because the cost is so much that it makes sense to bond some of this. I don't think we can build up enough cash to pay cash to fund this without doing some serious harm to your customers. So over the course of these years, we've got 60,000, 80,000, and then here's $1.3 million on the sewer side. Probably would want to bond for that. And then again, going out here based on timing, out in the later years, another 10 years from now or so, 1.2 million, 1.3 million to bond again to meet this level of service that's here. Now obviously we haven't decided that, we've had some conversations about it, but nothing's decided yet. The thing that everybody wants to know is what's the impact on rates? Larger again. So your combined water sewer bill for a quote typical average customer is about $156 a quarter. Based on this one scenario that we've run, we're looking at a 10% increase to that number every year. And that would fund the level of service that we've got built in the model this time. And it's going to get you, I'll show you some of these things over on the right here. So these charts here, the revenues and expenses, you can see we're very closely tying water and sewer revenues and expenditures together. On the sewer side, there's a little more variability because right now, you've got some extra cash from the sewer fund. So we can use some of that cash to keep rates a little bit lower and spend some money on capital, and then they catch up again. And then at some point, because we've raised them so much, the revenues start exceeding the costs. But that's 10 years out from now, so this will all change every year as you actually put your budget together. The middle, the blue boxes here, charts, this is your cash balance. Water's got a little more than it needs, but not a significant amount. Like I said, the sewer, we have extra cash. I think we can use some of that and then keep cash where it needs to be. And then in the later years, these jumps that you see here and here are related to any bonding that you do. You're gonna have a covenant that you have to have a certain amount of cash. So trying to account for that that's there. And then again, down here related to the bond coverage requirements, we want this red line to be above the black line after you've issued bonds. So that means you're meeting your coverage requirements, and with this structure, we can do it. Now, again, this is one structure, probably spent a couple of hours playing with all sorts of different ways of doing this, and came to this one that made the most sense at the time. Since we're talking about sewer again, this is where there's all these little yearly $80, $60, $100,000 in capital, and then these 2 years of significant investment to be bonded. So going this route, we touch on a lot of the, go back to the capital here. We meet the higher medium level of service on most items. The floating aerators is set at the low. The future lagoon expansion, it's high, but it's not in here. We are not trying to factor that in the next 10 years. So that's not included in any of this. So what we need to do is figure out where you want to be and then start moving forward. From a rate setting perspective, I've dealt with a lot of communities, and I was just at a conference in Illinois where we were talking about affordability of rates. There's a rising trend to get to about 10% increases per year in a lot of communities, which is starting to get serious when you start talking about money. The affordability in the village is still reasonable. You're not unaffordable relative to what the EPA considers affordable. But as you start moving forward, you could reach that point. If you start to get to a point of unaffordability, then you've got an option for USDA funding, lower cost loans, greater periods, perhaps some grants. From a strategies perspective, if I was making decisions, I would say let's pick a level of service that makes sense, look at the rate trajectory, and then start moving in that direction. And if you happen to get a grant to do some of this work, or if you start actually engineering and turns out it's a $200,000 instead of a $500,000 project in the end, you still keep on your rate schedule. So that just means you build up a little more cash. So the next time you need to bond, you're not bonding as much, or if an emergency comes up, you've got the cash to spend it. So there's strategies for getting some extra cash if you need it. Right now, we're kind of hovering about to where we think you'll need to be on cash. That doesn't account for any sort of emergencies that might pop up, which can be expensive. I could spend all evening going through this, but you probably don't want to hear it all. So I don't know where you want to go from here, John. I can talk more, or we can talk about levels of service. And
Well, I guess, you know, what we're looking for today, I think, is just some feedback from the council on, you know, how you would like us to proceed. You know, you see the numbers here which show, you know, a 10% annual increase in rates.
Is that just sewer, or is that 10%?
That's just
That's
sewer.
combined.
Just
Well, that is
sewer?
combined.
Yes, because.
Oh,
we're
that's combined water
yes.
and sewer.
Yes.
Okay.
And right now, just so you understand, the capital on the water side is going from 30,000 up to 250 or something, 300,000, 285 per year. So it's not
Can I
nearly.
ask you, when you do these studies, do you take into account the fact that when we receive an increase from the city of Saginaw, which comes and goes, I mean, they're, but when they raise ours, we then raise ours the same as theirs, but we actually make extra money by doing that.
Mhm.
Do you take that into account with everything else?
I'm following a rate setting methodology, not that one.
Okay, okay.
So I'm looking
Because
at what
by
your
us
cash
doing the
needs
same
are.
thing to the residents that the city of Saginaw does to us, we actually put more money in our funds
Which
by
is
passing
why-
it along that way.
Which is why on the water side, you do still have extra money here. So the green above the black means it's a little extra cash. But from what I'm doing in this model is saying, what are your cash needs? And we are assuming, let me go to the water budget here. Purchased water, assumptions. 6% increase on average per year from the city of Saginaw. And for all the communities that I'm working with Saginaw, and that's the number I'm using,
6, hasn't it been 10?
it's been 20, it's been 2, it's been
Uh-huh.
15, it's been 8, it's
It's been all over.
It hasn't been consistent.
Okay,
they keep telling us they'll get to consistency, but
they won't.
we haven't gotten there yet.
No, they won't.
But I think what this captures is, it captures the cash that we've been able to get, and the way he's doing it, it tells us what we need from the starting point of the budget we gave him.
Well, and we, unless I'm mistaken, we haven't changed our sewer rates in forever.
That's
I mean,
true.
forever.
2004, is that right?
Something like
I
that.
was still working here and we didn't change them, so, yeah, so, it's been a long time.
So, and big picture wise, what we really wanna be aware of is, you know, we haven't finished the water study yet. Just from what I know about the system, there's gonna be some improvements you're going to need to make. you
We know there's some in the water we
yeah,
have to make.
in the water
Um,
system. Probably, you know, on a similar scale to what you're seeing in the sanitary sewer. So just to give you an idea, you know, that's probably what we're gonna find out of the water. And on the streets, you're looking at something similar also. So,
But bonds, we can bond them both out as long as we have the money to pay for it.
right,
Payments,
Yep.
so, and we haven't had, a debt, we just paid off one, but we really haven't
We haven't had
carried
any
much
new
debt.
debt for 30 years.
No,
No.
no,
and I think what we're gonna end up doing is having some more work sessions with the council as this progresses, and really fine tune on what the final thing is gonna look like, you know, between the wastewater, you know, the streets and the water.
well, I still look at the streets and what we did last year as a plus in that street category where we upped the millage.
Yep.
So that we can, gather money instead of charging them as we do it, was a good thing, so,
And we haven't even talked about stormwater yet.
no,
Right.
no, we don't ever talk about stormwater.
So I wanted to just point out one other thing that,
Yeah.
that, I'm sorry?
We live with
We live with
stormwater.
stormwater,
It's all
yeah.
around you. One thing I wanted to point out, currently your rates for your water and your sewer are very different. You have on the water side a commodity rate with a minimum and then a ready to serve or a flat charge. On the sewer side, it's all minimum and then a commodity rate. There's no ready to serve charge. So you can see here, I'm playing with, let's start looking at what it would take to add in a ready to serve charge. By doing that, we reduce the number of units and reduce the cost per minimum, so the bill shifts around a little bit. This is just getting your rate structure more consistent.
That would be a good idea. We, for a long time, when we adjusted rates, we adjusted them in such a way that it really didn't touch senior citizens very much. And if you look at how it's charged out, you'll see that that's what was being done by all the other councils before us. I don't know if you can do that anymore. I think it needs to be personally, it needs to be a more consistent, water is water and this is what it costs. I don't know, that's just my off the top of my head thing.
And
I know we have over the years tried to keep the senior citizens rate exactly the same.
one of the things is the sewer rate, which we quote unquote calculate based on water usage, is not, it doesn't match up. Cause you get 30,000 gallons of sewer with
In the minimum.
$42 as your,
Yeah.
as your minimum. And then it's only 50 cents per 1,000 gallon
Yes.
above that. And that's incredibly low. And it's not associated with water whatsoever,
Well, it's
which,
incredibly high on the fixed side, so the senior citizens are paying for that.
They're
so-
paying more than they would if.
In a
we
way,
went
you're
a different way.
subsidizing the higher users, like.
We are.
charging. That's
We
what
are.
that's what you have right now.
And it needs to be
Right.
leveled.
equal.
Okay, I have a question about this November deadline. You're saying we need to make decisions on all of this so that you can get it in a report and get it turned in by November, is that correct?
Correct.
I personally, I don't know about anybody else, I would like to see all these figures on a piece of paper so I can sit down at my house and look at it, you know, and think about it and get my brain working on that. I wouldn't make a decision based on it.
No, and this is really just still high level, trying to figure out the concepts here before we get down to something that's asking you to approve
You know the
anything.
capital improvements plan we just passed?
Yes.
This is the same type of situation. You can still change it after you set it, I believe.
Right,
I
so
mean, we
what,
could say this is how we wanna go, and then next year go, it's not working out so good, we'd rather go this way.
You
This
can do
is-
that
This
with the
is
state.
something that you should be looking at annually and updating and changing annually.
Right, just like the other one.
so for, before November, you would adopt a rate structure, it could be the rate structure you have now, as long as there's something in place. But we then show that you have a plan to fund this capital improvement plan over some years. There is a big conversation, debate, whether you adopt 1 year of rates, or you adopt 10 years, or 5 years, or 3 years. And
With
that's
a
something
consistent increase.
you have to decide what works best for your community.
And we can look at the budget now and see that, I think we have roughly $30,000 a year that we freed up in water when we paid off the last payment. So you know you can bond for something that's gonna cost you $30,000 a year without doing anything, because we
Okay.
already have it in there.
Okay.
Because we got rid of that one and now we have a new one. But now you're looking at two, hard for me to say, two bonds at the same time, but,
Right.
you know, and that's what you're looking at, and
Really, I think the question of the day is, what level of service do we wanna provide, so we can kinda calculate. I honestly think, looking at this, that our level of service is almost gonna be different for each specific project.
Yes.
Cause
that's what I'm
the
thinking too.
Sunview one, I think is gonna be a high level of service, just based on my gut feeling. But some of the other ones we may reduce to do, an annual program for, cured in place piping. I feel like there's a mix, and it's not gonna look exactly like this, it's gonna be just a little bit different, and I think they're trying to anticipate that with the different levels of service.
And see, I would agree with that too, that we won't just go say, oh, yes, it's
No.
this or whatever.
Right.
You know, it's like project oriented.
Absolutely. And really, I think what it's gonna take a couple more sessions like this, to show what we have found, present it to you, get your ideas, get you something on paper that you can take home and look at, and really hone it in. So that's why I'm glad that we're looking at this in March, when we have a November deadline, we have some time. So, but it is gonna take.
But not a lot of time, so don't let it.
No, we don't.
Well,
I mean,
and-
we need to be moving on it.
And I think
So,
our next thing is gonna be the water asset
Yep.
management plan, cause these things, while they're separate, are very intertwined.
Mhm.
And the village will have this rate model when we're done, so every year Matt or whomever can sit down and update it and say, okay, this still works, or we need to tweak
So this model is gonna change every year,
Yes.
Yes.
yeah, with what we're doing
But
and what
first
we
we have to
need.
set one,
Right,
Right.
yeah.
So for instance, you know, Jim, if you wanna take this project and next year move it to here, you can.
and add in what we've already done
Yep.
each year, okay.
So-
Keeping in mind that sewer has to pay for sewer,
Right.
and water has to pay for water,
Right.
and we can't take funds from anywhere else to make that work.
So then it's
So
actually not,
rates are in,
okay, it's not
Right.
set in stone,
Right.
and then once that report is submitted, it's like, oh, this is our
It's the
starting
same
point, and
Nope.
okay, I get
What,
it now.
what the
Alright.
DEQ
But-
wants you to do, you know, with an asset management plan, it's a living document that every year gets looked at during the budget period and gets updated, reviewed. And it's just a smart way to show that the village is using the money that you're generating from sewer rates wisely. And that it is going towards these projects that have been planned out.
well, and don't you think it's also to understand that if we decide to raise the rates, we're gonna raise the rates. We're not going to say, oh, we're gonna raise the rates and then say, oh, not this year. Let's wait till next year.
Right.
That's not what we're here to do. We're here to make sure it works.
And the rate discussion is a little different than the expenditure discussion, because you can't, I wouldn't advise choosing year to year if we're gonna raise or lower rates based on what we wanna do that year. You have to look out that 20 years to determine what we wanna do then, cause
Well,
if you move a bond project up back 5 years or something, you can build up cash so that you can get a lesser bond, and then you're paying less debt over a period of time. So there's strategic things that we can do that way, but the rate that we set should increase annually and kind of almost be on autopilot, because we're gonna need the cash at some point.
Well, and I want the council to understand that the sewer rate is our own. Nobody interferes with that rate. Nobody throws things at it and we go, oh my God. The water rate isn't that way. We're dependent on the city of Saginaw and whatever they decide to do and whenever they decide to do it. So there might be some juggling of things in the water, where in the sewer, I think once, and I shouldn't say I think we should think that once we set it, because nobody's going to throw a wrench into it. It's just us.
No attachments to it.
No, nobody can change it.
Yeah, the only thing is an emergency, that
Yeah.
something fails.
Well, that would be ours too, though. That's our
Sure.
problem.
Yes.
Whereas the city of Saginaw is such an unknown.
And you have no control
Commodity,
over how they
no.
set rates.
So when is the water study going to be done?
We're working on it right now, and we hope to have it done in the next month or two, I would say six weeks.
What about the streets?
The streets, we've got the first part of that done. We have all the condition assessments and the ratings done, and we have some projections on what we think you need to spend, depending on what level of service you wanna provide. And after we're done with this, I'd be happy, I think I've got a graph on my computer I can show you if you wanna look at that.
No, I'd rather you, when you have it all completed,
Yep.
I'd rather you do it then.
Yep, but, you know, with the streets, similar to the sewer and similar to the water, you know, some investment is needed in the streets. And you can tell, I mean, you get complaints from citizens about streets all the time. And it's one of the number one things you hear.
So I want to just touch briefly on the stormwater financials. There is no rate structure for paying for stormwater. Very limited options in Michigan to pay for stormwater. So the report there will simply be, here's what was found, and here's what it costs, and then we'll look at your general fund, your streets funds, and see where there's any potential money, and maybe you can afford some things, but if you're also improving the streets, you might not have so much money in the streets funds. But it's just a report to the state to say that we looked at it and we've evaluated. My hope is that when the state receives 500 stormwater reports that all say, oh yeah, we've identified millions and millions of dollars, but we don't have any way to pay for it, maybe the legislature will say, oh, maybe we need to come up with a way to pay for this, because we can't do it right now.
And your stormwater system, from what we've seen, it's also in rough shape. You know, there's a lot of pipes out there that are non-functioning. There's a lot of pipes that you don't even own. You know, the county drain commission owns it, MDOT owns it, they're private. You know, so, you know, stormwater's a whole different animal. So I guess we're looking for feedback from you on where do you think we should proceed? You know, do you think a 10% annual increase in rates is, you know, attainable? Is that too high? Is it too low? Do you wanna look at a totally different type of rate structure? Do you think we're totally off of our rockers and you wanna go a different direction? You know, those are all, we're kinda looking for feedback from you, you know, so we can go back and work on it some more and then, you know, bring some more information back to you.
It's a difficult thing to think about.
And maybe we don't need the answer tonight. Maybe you can mull it over, talk about it, and, you know, we meet again and, you know, go over it that way.
Well, I do think that we need to make it more equal across the board. I don't like like we talked last time, this, you know, the high users
Are being subsidized.
are being subsidized by the ones that aren't using very much.
Well,
I
they're the
don't like
ones in
that.
between.
Yeah,
The-
I think
the
we
low
need,
user seniors aren't paying much.
yeah, I think we need to get it more equal across the board.
And our equivalent units aren't really right, they should be more adjusted to the AWWA for the meter sizes.
Yep.
Equivalent
What
units?
is that?
What's that?
There's, well, maybe John. But,
Hey, let's just open a can of
but
worms.
anyway, that's something that has, a homeowner is one residential unit, that's a 5/8 meter. You go to a larger unit, there's a calculation for,
Oh, yeah, we charge more for that.
right, but they're not really aligned to what the American Water Works.
They try to
standard.
base everything on what the normal
Right.
size would be. So, say you have a big one, they assume that it's worth, say an 1.25 inch meter is worth 4 residential units. So they charge based on that.
So when we say worth, what it means is, when you build the system, you have to build it to service everybody. So a 5/8 inch meter can have so much water going through it at a time. A 8-inch meter can have 80 times as much water going through it. So the ratios between one meter size and another is what is used by the engineers to decide how big the system needs to be. So if you say, we expect to have 400 homes in this community added on in the next 20 years, and probably with that, X number of businesses and industries, that's gonna give the engineers a sense of, okay, how big do the pipes need to be? How big does the transmission, the pumping, the storage system have to be? So all of that is what we call demand capacity. It's very unlikely, just like your electric panel at home, you're never really gonna use that full 200 amps in your system, or 100 amps, or whatever size. It's the same with a water meter. It's very unlikely that everybody would max out their meters at the same time on the same day. But we still have to build the system to meet that, and for fire suppression on top of it. So all of these meter sizes, the ratios get to how much water can go through relative to another one.
And if I'm not mistaken, the way it's set up right now, the larger meters on a ratio means don't pay their fair shares.
Right, so right now, the St. Charles meter ratios, a 1 inch is 1.4 times the residential, and let's go to a 6 inch, almost 15 times. But at the American Water Works Association standards, a 1 inch is 1.5 and a 6 inch is 50 times.
Oh.
So again, this is where the larger customers are being paid, or being charged less than their quote fair share.
Okay.
So, and that's only,
That's like the ready to serve charge.
Yes.
Right,
That's
yeah,
the
That's what you're talking
exactly.
about.
Yes.
and that's only one method. You know, there's a million different methods you could use,
Right.
but
Well, we don't really have that many large, I mean, other than the school and the
There's a few, but
A
they're
few.
still being. they're-
apartment buildings, yeah,
Right,
that's
they're not,
true.
you know, if you go by the American Water Works standards, they're
So we could pick up some
They're
money.
being subsidized by the lower users.
Okay.
Again,
I didn't
You've
realize
got
that.
3 4-inch, 3 2-inch, 16 1.5-inch.
17 1-inch.
But most of them are in the 5/8 inch.
I mean, it's not gonna be astronomical what you're gonna pick up, but
Oh,
it'll
but
be
it's something.
It's
coming,
just-
coming up with a standard and sticking to it.
To make it easier, not easier, fairer, to make it
Yeah, make
fairer.
it more
Equity is an important
fair,
component.
fair and equitable for everybody, not just.
Well, if we're talking about raising rates, we've gotta make it fair for everybody right up,
Right.
before we do that. We've gotta come up with a
So
plan.
maybe we adopt a
Yeah.
new, you know, let's stand there.
Well, we don't have any rate rules per se, do we? I mean,
Well, we have readiness to serve
I know, but I
calculations.
mean, we don't have
Per-
anything for in the future, like this is how much we're gonna raise each year, and
No.
we
it's-
just raise them when we
It's an
feel like it.
annual thing, so if you wanna
Yes,
raise
I know.
rates, we do a
Mhm.
resolution to raise the rates. Yeah.
Well, and that's what we learn out of these asset management plans. You look into the future, and you can come up with a plan and see what you need to do to meet your goals.
Well, I'm all for making the sewer a fair system. It's just kind of a hodgepodge of something that's been there since we built the sewer system. The water system, yeah, that needs to be fixed too. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Oh, yeah.
Well, does anybody here not wanna raise rates at all?
That would be me.
Okay,
I never want to raise rates, but,
So I'll talk
if
to
they have to be raised, they have to be raised, but what I'm saying, I just am not a fan of that.
no,
But I don't like to pay extra money for anything.
None of us like to be-
Huh? Yeah, that's all. Yeah, to me, we have a lot to think about here. You know, to say, oh, we're gonna come to some decision here tonight, I'd like to see this discussed. We talked about, problems and things that we need to do. I would, at least I am not prepared to vote on anything tonight.
No, and I
Oh,
don't
no,
think we're
I don't
asking
think
for a
we were
vote.
going to.
And I would open up that if you want me to look at 2 or 3 different options.
Do that.
We can look at them and say, okay, here's different ways of doing this.
Right.
Here's different levels of service. What are you most comfortable with?
We want to get information from you today.
Oh, are you gonna increase your rates? You're gonna add on cost to us if you look at it for 2 or 3 different ways?
No, my costs, they're fixed.
Okay.
Doesn't cost you another
We're-
dime.
We're a small town, we're a small community, and we have to watch.
And I watch
money.
money,
Yeah,
I watch money.
But while this is scary, I mean, raising rates anytime sounds scary. Like we had talked about before, our rates are very good.
They're very low.
Yeah,
They're
I
very
mean,
low.
for the customer, they're very good. We've done a lot with the little that we're bringing in, where other communities have been raising their rates, every 5 to 10 years, and we're very good on our rates for the customer. I mean, they haven't been moved very much at all.
But I think that's due to the fact that we watch that money, and we also have a really
Yeah.
good DPW here,
So,
that they take care
For
of.
us to raise rates, it's,
I
I
don't
mean,
know why
sometimes
other
it's due.
people's are so high. I don't understand that.
Hmm?
Why, I don't understand why other people's are so high.
yeah.
Many reasons.
Okay.
Every system is different.
Because
We talked about the type of pipe you have. If you
up
have a
north,
different
my
type
ready
of
to
pipe,
serve
it
is $60.
fails. Okay.
Yeah,
Where at?
at the cottage, it's $60 ready to serve.
We don't pay anything for water at Houghton Lake for our cottages.
Do you have city water?
You got a well.
We have a well.
Oh, I was gonna say, no, wait a minute.
No, wait,
I-
you did pay to drill the well, and you paid the electricity, and you paid to treat it,
I was
and.
gonna say, I have
So
the
that's
same,
not free either.
I have the same water we
But
have
no,
here,
but we do
so.
have
When you need a new well,
We
you'll
have-
pay.
We do have sewer up there, yeah, when something goes wrong, which it did already, there's real interesting. But no, that was just a joke. But if you could look at some,
Mine's not a
I have
joke.
to say that because
Watch her.
people take things I say too seriously. But, if you could give us several different options, I would really like to see that. Now, like I said, I'd like to see a handout where in advance of a meeting I can look over so I can ask a halfway intelligent question, because I can't even see your figures up there
Fair
very
enough,
well right now,
I understand.
okay?
Yeah, and in a model where it shows it's more in line, what'd you say the one rate was, the
Yeah, show
American?
me, show me.
The American Water Works Association?
And you said there's others?
Well, there's, there's,
I don't
there's
do a 10,
a million
15,
different
20.
ways you
Is there?
can
Okay.
do rates.
I
You know,
really
American
appreciate
Water
it.
Works Association is just one that's very
It's in-
widely
it's in
used,
water.
and it's a good guide. I mean,
All right.
it's rock solid.
Yeah, we could see something along that line.
And that's the readiness to serve. The rate is
Yeah.
a different thing.
Yeah.
The rate per 1,000 gallons, or some places do it by cubic yard or cubic foot.
Cubic
Yeah.
foot, yeah.
Some communities are strictly a flat fee for every meter, you pay this. You know, some communities, it's purely, you know, how much water you use. So, I mean, every community's different.
Got a question.
Yep.
You're saying this is gonna be a 10% if we pick a 10, it's gonna be a 10% raise. Let's say we chose that. And you say it's split between the two?
So, right now, let me just go back here. Scroll, so if we look up at the top, to go from where you are now, and then we adjust the rates to build some more cash to pay for these costs, we can go up 10% this year, and then 10% this year, and that's the total water and sewer bill. So that's the total
that's the
bill that you
total.
get.
But they're gonna do it evenly though.
This is just,
Maybe
my
not
preference
even.
when we do rates is either 30% all at once, and then 5% a year, or you smooth it out as much as you can. So I'm trying to smooth it out as much, and what you can't see very well here, it's a little blurry, is over here, this 8%. What this is showing is by the time we get up to 2029, and we've sold that second bond and started paying that, in the future, if we don't add any more debt, your rates are gonna stabilize to probably 3 or 4% per year, normal cost.
I think we're on two different lines of thought here. I
Yes.
know, my thought is, if we raise it 10%, are we raising 5% water, 5% sewer? Or
So,
will those be different?
it's different. So here it's showing, for this year, 2020, the ready to serve for water goes up 11%, and the commodity rate goes down 5.6%. So we're shifting how much of the cost is being recovered through a fixed charge versus a variable charge. So we want, in an ideal world, you would recover your fixed costs from a fixed charge. That way, no matter how much water people use, your fixed costs are always covered. It's just not realistic to do that, so we
It's flat.
move in that direction as much as we can. But then going forward, the ready-to-serve charge is fairly steady, 2.5%, 3% a year, whereas the commodity rate's going up 6%, 8%, because the biggest part of that is the 6% from City of Saginaw. So that's your
So
commodity
you've kind
rate.
of folded that into the 10%?
Yes. Right, so that's the
Really?
water. And then on the sewer side, we're going, the commodity rate jumps up quite a bit. I don't know why it's divided up, because there is no ready-to-serve charge. Commodity rate jumps up and then keeps going steady. These numbers are not correct down here, I'm just looking at the dollar values. And then we introduce this much lower minimum charge from $42 to $10 a quarter, but we add in the $20 for the ready-to-serve on the sewer. So now your minimum bill on the sewer, instead of $42, is now $31.
And then but you reduce the minimum bill from 30,000 gallons to
Right.
5,000
Yes.
gallons, which would be the same as water. So,
Okay.
so if you have a minimum bill for water, you would have a minimum bill for sewer, but over the 5,000, you're paying the commodity charge.
Okay.
Well, and John, you brought up another really good point. You know, what he's trying to show in this particular model is, you know, let's see what 10% per year does. You know, another option may be, you know, let's do a 50% increase, and then the next year a 5, and the next year a 5. So, I mean, there's different things you could do, you know. I'm kind of a proponent opposite of you of doing it nice and easy instead of, you know, hitting everyone all at once up front. But, you know, that's a decision that eventually you're gonna need to make. You know, what is the best for, you know, your constituents, and you know, moving forward, you know, what is the best way that you wanna do this?
And that's why if we had some options,
Yep.
you understand?
Yeah.
what I'm looking at?
Right.
Some
Oh, yeah.
different scenarios, and
I-
that's,
we
so we can
run-
look at them.
Right. I just need kind of a ballpark to work within, because otherwise it's an infinite number of choices,
Yep.
which I can't give you.
An overall 30 or an overall 10?
So, I mean, are you more in favor of, you know, having the rates being increased more steadily, or would you rather, you know, have a big jump and then, you know, lesser jumps in the?
I think a gradual increase.
Yeah, I think gradual for here, I think gradual, you know, I think if we do that, we'll have everybody in town down here with picket signs, you know,
Yeah,
so-
but they only come once.
But they only come once.
Yeah.
And you get your money and you can invest it.
So there's, I mean, there's pros and cons to both.
There is. So in other words, do a
And
one
interest
big
rates are
bang
going
and
up.
one big bang and then
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
gradual
don't,
raises after that.
I don't
Yeah.
think, the people are gonna like it.
So
Yeah.
the-
They're not gonna like any of it.
So
No,
the
but-
reason,
No, I mean.
the reason
Yeah.
we're able to do the 10% per year is if you look at this sewer cash here, and I know you probably can't see it very well, Sarah, but you've got extra cash here
I'm sitting
You're in the
in
wrong
seat.
place.
that we can use to allow a 10% increase. If you didn't have that much cash, we would have to go 20% in the first year. But because you have that cash right now, okay, we can use some of that to moderate, ease into the rates and soften the blow.
See if you,
And incidentally, I'm not Sarah, I'm
I'm-
sitting in her seat, okay?
Well,
I'm
sorry.
I'm Diane.
But
I-
even if it's 15% or,
yeah.
but 50% is,
I've been through this before, and what we'll do is we'll buy some armor for Jenny and.
Don't throw stuff at us.
Marguerite.
Yes,
And, yeah, put in Marguerite, and just hit them all at once, and let them all get it over with at one time. And, but it's still gonna go up, so they'll still come back next year, so save your armor.
I've been through this before
You
where
have.
public education really helps, where if we all know what we're talking about and
Yeah.
everybody has the same story, whether Dick sees somebody at the auto parts or you see him at the grocery store.
Yep,
They're getting the same answer, why we've done this. It's,
and why it had to be
Well,
done.
we have to
and, you
know
that-
why it
that's-
has to be
well, that's
done,
what I mean,
yeah.
but everybody knows and
Let's
everybody's,
move to Chesaning.
Yes.
Have a
But
resident.
yeah,
That's-
you can, yeah,
You know
we
what,
got real
you can move
options.
to Chesaning, and the bills are
And we
high.
could
No,
take a
no,
look
they
at
won't
it
say
and make
that.
a
Okay, okay.
decision based on what the numbers are.
but public
Yeah.
education goes a long way.
It does,
really
you're
goes.
I
absolutely.
mean,
right.
they're gonna go up no matter what. But my, looking at it from my opinion, my standpoint, I'd rather see it not hit all at once.
Yeah, me too.
I would, I just think, looking at it from the rest of us, I just think it'd be easier, I know we're gonna pay it in the long run no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's like paying for your truck up front or paying it monthly. You know,
So I
you're gonna
think
pay for it, but I'd rather pay it monthly.
And from what's went on in Flint, I think people are more understanding of infrastructure needs now.
Definitely.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
nobody
The
wants that
hardest thing to
problem.
do is infrastructure, because nobody can see it.
right, they drive down the roads, but they don't
And,
see the
you know,
water.
you can
and
fix the
sewer.
downtown, you can fix the parks, and it's all visible, but when you start working
Underground.
So the
underground,
question, I guess, then would be, what, 10%, 15, 20?
10, well, I didn't
Up front.
understand that the 10 includes the city of Saginaw ups as they come along too.
That's assuming a 6% increase from the
On
city.
average.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Okay.
average per year. I mean,
So we're really only raising it 4%?
Yeah.
Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, yeah.
I will say that the water rates wouldn't be going up nearly as much as the sewer rates. So
Okay.
obviously, what we're talking about here is investing $3 million over the next 10 years in your sewer system and investing not even $1 million in your water system. Right now, your AMP might be.
I was-
It's gonna be,
more
I was
than
thinking it'd be a little higher than $1 million in the water. When
that. And it might
you-
be, he's not finished that.
Yes.
yeah. I don't
When
know,
you,
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know how much, but it's probably in the area of $1 million or more.
substantial,
Looking at the age of your water system.
yes. It's much older than our sewer system.
So do we have a number then?
10%, try it.
10%?
I don't think we need a number right now.
Okay,
But I think, when we.
Well,
get
you
the
wanted
asset
something to
management-
work with, right?
Well, right, I think more
because
so
we wanna see
on
something.
Yeah.
level of service and methodology.
Yep.
So it sounds like people agree that putting some sort of ready-to-serve charge on the sewer, modifying the minimum charge on the sewer to be in line with the water, so that we
Yes.
don't have this vast
Yeah.
difference.
Look at the AWWA
We convert, use the method, the ratios from the AWWA.
Yeah, show us what that looks like, what
Yeah,
that comes up to
What,
be.
what is, when you do a sewer rate, like, what is the average you build into the readiness to serve? Is it 50% of the fixed cost, or what's standard, I guess?
well, there is no standard.
What's common, I guess,
Let me see if I actually put,
Everybody's different.
is there?
I used to have a chart, and I didn't put it in here, it's because it's too hard to measure. So, if you think about it, fixed costs, truly fixed cost debt service, you have to pay that every year, so that should be assigned to the ready to serve charge, so you know you're gonna get that much. And then a large portion of personnel costs, because somebody still has to maintain it. Electricity is a variable cost for the most part, because it only kicks on when there's flow. What else? You don't have any chemicals on the sewer side. Capital plans, we put sometimes in variable, sometimes in fixed, depending on what it is. So each of those want postage, billing is a fixed cost. If I was to look at your system, your budget, I would say off the top of my head, 80% of it is fixed, but we're not assigning 80% of the cost to the ready to serve. That's just too much.
I mean, it's 40, 50% average?
The state used to require on the sewer side that the fixed component, the ready to serve, not be more than 30, maximum 40%. But we know, especially in a smaller system, that the fixed costs are much higher. So and it's probably, if I was to look back here, yeah, so we're increasing right now, at this point, I'm assuming I'm increasing the fixed charge and the commodity charge about the same. And again, I'm trying to deal with the affordability question too. I don't wanna put everything on fixed, because that just becomes unaffordable. So it's this balancing act. The other thing that we know is if you increase the variable rate, there is a demand elasticity function that goes in there, and people reduce their consumption. So we have to factor that in too.
If people get hit with a big water bill, they start using less water.
Right, yes. And if too much of your costs are on the commodity side, then your revenue goes down a lot. So we have to just be sensitive to
When
that.
you said our average bill was $159, does anybody here have a $159 water bill?
Water sewer.
Water and sewer, does anybody here have that high?
I don't yeah, ours gets up there, yeah.
I think ours gets up there, yeah.
Mine's like 120.
Well, we were talking the other day,
And it
because
just went up,
somebody on the
because I think
planning
the city of
commission puts like
Saginaw is great.
$100, I don't know where they.
I've seen other communities where
You
they
haven't
will,
touched it?
put like a debt service on their water bill.
Right.
Which would go away over time, or,
That's another option. So the whole bill and what comes through the billing system is another question. So yeah, you could add, like we're thinking of adding a ready to serve charge on the sewer. You could add a debt service charge that shows up as a debt service charge on the bill. Right now, it's just rolled into the ready to serve charge, so a lot of that is debt related.
Well, when we first put the sewer in, most people thought that the ready to serve charge for the sewer was a 20-year thing. So at the 20 years, at the end of 20 years, they're all coming in going, well, I thought this was paid for. Well, no, it's never gonna be paid for. No, this is never gonna go away.
You mean on the water side?
No, I mean on the sewer, when we put the sewer system in,
Okay.
there was that $42
Oh, that's the
sitting there.
minimum bill.
And they thought that was paying for their sewer, and I said, but you're also paying for your sewer and your taxes, what do you think
right,
that
they
is?
didn't understand the
They didn't
property-
understand it
the
at all.
Property taxes paying the bill.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
they didn't
People
understand it at
just
all,
don't
and so,
understand it.
when it didn't go away, you had a whole bunch of angry people.
Well, sure, they just didn't
The
understand.
little people in the office going, oh, I'm sorry, it's staying. They had nothing to do with it. So that's where Don's thing comes in. You gotta let them know what they're paying for, and
Why?
that it's there to stay.
I kinda like the idea of that debt reduction instead of ready to serve. I never quite understood what ready to serve
Well,
was.
those
Well,
two things are
you would have
different.
both though, Lois.
You'd have
Could have both?
You'd have both, because the debt service would be something that would go away when the debt was paid for. When the
That would
bond
never
was
be
paid
paid
for,
for.
it would go away.
Readiness to serve is a
perpetual service charge for maintaining the system.
It's an operational
It will never
cost.
go.
We never used to charge Ready to Serve when people went to Florida, we just shut down their bill and stopped. Now,
Yeah.
I believe we charge the Ready to Serve no matter what. But,
Unless they have their water shut off.
And-
oh,
And
up
that's,
there, if we have a shut off, you still pay the
in
Ready
some
to Serve,
communities,
because
they're
it's out
doing
there
that,
and ready to
that's-
serve.
It's there to serve you if you shut it off.
Yep, that's your problem.
That's some communities,
Yeah,
that's
'cause
something,
we
That's something else they
that's
do up
something you
there.
guys will have to deal with if you wanna go that route.
Yeah.
Well,
So I guess moving
What
forward,
are we gonna have to ask you for it?
we're gonna have a couple,
Well,
you
we're
know,
gonna have a-
iterations, a couple more meetings. You know, how would you like to proceed? Do you want us to present to you at your regular council meetings? Do you wanna have special meetings? Do you wanna form a committee? You know, those are the kind of things that we wanna, you know, get from you, you know, moving forward. We had kinda started with a SAW committee. Then we bounced some ideas off of that committee. But now that we're getting into some more tangible things, I guess, how do you want to move forward?
Well, nothing should take this long again, right? It should be a
Hopefully.
shorter presentation.
Yep.
Couldn't
Dream
it-
on. But anyway,
But wouldn't that work at a regular council meeting, you know?
I don't know if I do it at a regular
No.
council
I-
meeting.
I don't
no.
care for
It just
that
makes
idea
that
either.
meeting that much longer.
Exactly.
And, unless you want everybody to sit through something like this until we come to some kind of conclusion.
Trying to force
Um,
an issue.
But I don't like the committee thing either, because then I think if we're going to do something this, and I call this kind of drastic, I mean, this is different from what we've done in the past.
Yeah, everybody
We should
needs
do
to
it
be
as a
informed.
whole,
Yes,
so that we all hear it, we all have our input.
we all have
That's
the
just the
same
way I
story.
feel about it.
When you go out into the
Do we wanna
public.
set up a standing monthly meeting, something like that?
Until we get through just this part.
Till we get through just this part, and we're looking at April, May, June, July, August, September, October. You know, realistically, we only have
Six months. Or we could do like a couple quarterly
After the regular
meetings.
Yeah, just some, I would say, you know, at the point we're at right now, we're gonna wanna meet a little more regularly, so we can get feedback and make some changes and report back to you. So I think, you know, up front here, we probably wanna meet at a minimum monthly, I would think. And then maybe as summer comes, you know, maybe we skip a month, you know, something like that.
I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
That'll work.
So why don't we work, I don't think we need to set the date, but maybe we'll work with Matt and try to set up a time when we can get
When
together.
you have something ready.
We'll make it a goal to meet monthly for the next couple months anyways.
Yeah, and like have something we can really
Yep.
look at and write on.
Cause if I can't scribble on my papers, I'm not
She's not
happy.
happy.
Yeah, you can see them, they're like.
Let's do that, you get something together and let Matt know, and
Okay.
Maybe we can come up with a proposed schedule of meetings for
Yep.
the regular meeting coming up in a couple weeks.
Yep.
And then they can vote to schedule those in advance, cause we'll have to notice them.
Yep.
Like legally and all that stuff,
Right.
so. We'll wanna know in advance, so we'll have something for the next meeting, I think is probably the best idea.
Okay.
To have a
how about
schedule.
the third Monday of the month.
I'd have to look.
I don't know. Mondays?
Monday's a good day. You're nice and fresh for the week.
Well, yeah, but some people head north every weekend, and then Monday trying to come
You gotta
home,
be
boy,
back
that
every
can wear out.
Monday.
No, I don't have to, I don't go to work anymore.
I think we're gonna find a time and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
might not be everyone, might be 5 weeks here, 6 weeks there, 4 weeks there, just to make it
Right.
fit.
Well, it kinda makes sense if you're gonna have an extra meeting to have it the fourth Monday of the month, second and fourth Wednesday of the month, keep it consistent.
That'll work.
We could try it, it might conflict with the park committee on a certain months, but
Okay.
What Monday now?
No, not Wednesdays, just keep it on Wednesdays.
Second and fourth Wednesday. For a couple months at least, try it out.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
That okay
Thank
with
you
everyone?
guys for your patience and everything too.
That'll work.
It's a lot of
Sounds like it'll
information to
work.
digest.
It is.
Boy, it sure is.
We live and breathe this stuff and you guys are just, you get
Yeah.
to bits and drabs, so.
And that's the problem here. It is, just
I
really,
think that's gonna
Well,
be the
that's, and
problem
that's why
with
we wanted to have a special meeting
the
tonight to
increase.
present it
I
all to
think
you.
that some of these
We
pictures
knew
were
that this
not
wasn't
in the
gonna be a
newspaper.
meeting where we're
And
gonna
what
make
was,
some key decisions. This is gonna be,
People
you know,
would
just
realize a little more.
us
about
presenting the facts to
infrastructure
you
this
and you
place.
giving us some ideas on how to proceed. So,
Who is the DPW meeting, committee?
That's me.
me, Jim.
Would you guys rather
Sarah.
just do it?
Well, I don't know
Okay.
why we would do a committee if we're just gonna have to come and explain it during
You
the
would.
meeting.
No.
And then we're gonna do the same thing, take up this time to explain it and answer all the questions
Right,
in a
'cause
meeting.
I think it
So
should be
just do it during the
It should be
meeting.
the whole
Okay.
council, I don't think they
Yeah.
should do that.
I just wanted to make sure you're all on the same page. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, we learned quite a bit.
Yeah, we did, I learned a lot
We'll
tonight.
be quizzing you when we meet again.
Oh, no.
Be quick
Even
to
though it's
do.
not in writing.
Yeah,
so you know more about wastewater now than you ever wanted to know.
I know more
So
about
let's
our
make the next
system
meeting
than
on
I
the
ever wanted to
24th of
know.
April.
Wow.
Scary bad system.
no, the next meeting is our regular meeting.
Yeah, but I mean with them,
Oh,
our next meeting.
oh, okay.
How does that fit into Easter though? Oh, well, if it's a Wednesday, it won't be a problem, so, okay.
Yeah,
It's Administrative
Everyone's-
Professionals Day, if anybody's celebrating, Jenny.
That's what?
Administrative Professionals Day.
See that?
there you go, Matt.
That's a good thing to discuss.
I mean,
I-
state
I-
secretary
the
is
what do we
still
do
on.
with
The
that?
24th works for me.
Yes, that's good for me too.
Is it better for you to have a 7 o'clock or a 5:30 again, or?
I don't care.
I personally like the 5:30.
I like the 5:30.
I like 5:30, get out of here. and
It's
go
the ones
home.
that can make it.
5:30 is good.
Most of
I
us
can
are
make that
pretty
work.
flexible. Yeah.
The lining of them.
Those of us that aren't will
They
be.
don't know.
Yeah, well,
Well, we only
Yeah,
have
they
two
don't
people
see
who work still, so that
Yeah.
means Sarah's not here, so.
That's me and Jim.
Well, now.
would you rather just get, would you rather just
Jim
come
and
along
I,
at 5:30?
Yeah, that's my son.
5:30 works.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'll work.
it gets us home at a decent time.
Yeah.
Especially if those guys get long-winded.
No, it's gonna be us next time that gets long.
Yeah, yeah.
24th
So
at
we good then?
5:30.
I think we're good. Thank you very
Excellent.
much for
Thank
your
you.
time and.
Yeah, thank you very
we'll
much.
See you in the near future.
At 5:30.
That's,
Okay, before we, we have a
Okay,
bathroom break?
moving on. Resolution 19.8, the MDOT mileage map update.
Can I ask, is this an official piece of paper that's gonna go someplace else besides here?
Yes.
Okay, then on your first whereas, the word completed needs to lose that D.
Oh, okay.
And then I did have a question, did you guys carefully check your property descriptions?
These were done by Spicer.
Okay.
Did you guys?
Yeah, well, they would probably, no, I've just seen terrible things happen because of a property description that left something out, and there was a really, the piece of property was like this, and people were arguing, they were in court. Over, it was a little teeny tiny pie shaped, but it was just narrow, right?
Oh, we've been there before with old Grant's property.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was a
no,
while
no,
ago.
these are, I
Those
had
are official.
Spicer, these are what are called center line descriptions, which
Okay.
describes the road from beginning to end.
And aren't they, they're in a plan of their own anyway, aren't they? I mean, the
So,
Entrepreneur Drive one is.
and so this is them, and these are, if you wanna change the names of the roads too, I came up with what I thought were the best.
What is Eagle View Drive?
It's the road that
The
we,
end, the
yeah,
very end?
it's the one
East
that
End
we,
Road that goes north and south.
Okay.
Where's that?
Kind of a neat name, because you can go out there and look at eagles if you can,
yeah, that was
you
the,
like lagoons.
that was, yeah, that
It
was,
was on the
Where's
table,
Beaver Creek at? Drive?
Beaver Creek runs right next
You
to,
must have two.
under the agenda.
right next to the
Look under the
lagoons.
agenda.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Well, South Martin Road is already named, but.
I added the south
Must have
because
grabbed both- must have stuck
it
the
wasn't
other
on
way.
our map, so they don't, the MDOT doesn't know it exists.
Never mind, I got one.
Are we getting rid of entrepreneur?
You stuck it on the back of my agenda.
No,
But we're just adding these.
that's a shame.
Do you know on some, GPS systems, South Martin Road, you know, which what is called out there, but Main Street where I live, they're still connected across the river. And we end up with semi trucks that will come down at the end of the road and be stuck.
I swear
and
like the
stuck,
devil.
And be screaming and yelling, and what did you people do with the bridge? Well, I've lived here over 50 years and there's not been a bridge there, so I, you know, it's still.
You
say there was.
I know.
I remember
Well, I think this is a good idea, so.
it. Did you
just
party on
update
it?
No skate on it.
So if we
Under
update
it,
it, then
but we
we,
partied on
so,
top of it.
eligible then for grant money then too, right, if that's the case?
No, we get Act 51.
Well, Act 51.
Oh, we get extra
Yeah.
money from that.
They'll add it to our annual calculation of local streets.
And you want every inch you can get.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Anyone have any questions on this resolution? Do I hear a motion to accept this resolution?
You do.
I'll
Do I have
second it.
support?
I'll second it.
Have support. Do we have a roll call?
Right. Sarah Tiley, absent. Diana Coots,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Horner,
Yes.
McPhail,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
and Lois Tiley.
Yes.
Motion's carried. And the next item would be a closed session pursuant to section 8A.
Can we have a bathroom break first? May, sir? May we have a bathroom break first?
Why, of course.
Okay. Yay.
Time's up.
Thank you.
You should have said that.
Wait, don't we have to have a motion to go into closed session?
Let's do the motion to go into closed session, then you go to the bathroom and go in, okay? Do I hear the motion?
I so moved.
Support?
I'll support.
All those in favor?
It's a roll call.
Thanks, Lois.
It's a roll call.
Still gotta wait till she comes back. Bye, Don.
Good night, everyone.
You don't want to
Good
stick
night.
around?
Good
I
night.
think I'll pass.
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
See you tomorrow.
Chris, did you make the motion?
I
Yes.
did.
Oh, you did.
Well, you can ask 5 of us what we think.
Yeah. It's a quorum, technically.
Right?
It is a quorum.
Yeah. I'm sh-
You can get all the way down to the end, Jenny.
You can go ahead and do your roll call.
Sarah Tiley, absent. Coots,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Horner,
Yes.
McPhail,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
What abstention?
Want to go yell on it back?
It's carried.
You just counter absent, and then it's a,
Tiley, absent.
At this moment,
and then it's a,
Motion's carried then.
and then it's a quorum. So the
you
motion-
got the heat on there this time so you don't freeze us out?
I think it's good. I think the heat should have been going in there.
The door's been.
Alright, so that
Yeah, make
you
sure
can
it
shut
was.
that off.
I'll make a motion that we close the closed session and reopen the regular session.
I'll second.
Support? I mean,
Yeah.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have to roll
Aye.
call?
Yes.
Roll call.
Okay, roll call.
Okay. Coots,
Yes.
Sarah Tiley's absent. Newman,
Yes.
Horner,
Yes.
McPhail,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
and Lois.
Yes.
Any public comments?
No, I'm just waiting to take Lois out.
Well, that's
Do I
a
hear,
public
do
comment.
you hear motion to adjourn this meeting?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Support?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you all for coming, all of us.